Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. I'm your host, Shayna, and welcome to another episode of One Track Record. I want to thank you guys again for liking and sharing. I see we have a few new subscribers, so welcome. You're officially a track star. And if you're not familiar with this voice/face, you may want to go back a few episodes because you're going to be lost for sure. In fact, to prevent myself from losing anybody, today's episode is more so of a catch up for those who have yet to hear previous episodes, especially those pertaining to the love language series. So, with all that being said, if you're listening to this and you did not catch up on Cupid and Psyche, please go back. Please, cuz you're going to miss the context of what I'm speaking of. And today's episode is not going to be too long only because I have slightly lost my voice if you couldn't tell. And I just want to focus on two things in particular that are going to be pertaining to the next series, which I will reveal shortly. But again, thank you for all who have supported in many different ways. No, you do not have to support me financially, but if you decide to, I appreciate it. I don't do this for money. Again, I just do this because I know what God has called me to speak on, and I'm in obedience. And that's where the blessings come. So, we left off last episode speaking on the series of love languages, the four love languages God uses in the Bible, in the Greek that's translated. We spoke on the definition of infatuation. We spoke of the God of infatuation and the God of love. However, we also did describe the ultimate love, agape, that was sent from the Father, the Most High. Now, I wanted to bring the correlation of Cupid and Psyche. And if you haven't quite figured it out yet, because it's not so obvious, to some it may not be so obvious, to others, maybe, if you know the true initial story of what I'm going to be describing in just a few moments. But the story of Cupid and Psyche, being that it's a Roman myth, has many modern takes on it. And when I say that, I really mean the story has adapted over time. For those of you who know the origin or the original story, the gruesome story of Beauty and the Beast, I was waiting for somebody in the comments to bring the correlation and say this story sounds a little familiar. It's a little familiar. And if you thought of that, congratulations, you're correct. If you didn't, that's okay. So there's a few elements of Cupid and Psyche that I wanted to bring light on again, and the best illustration to further prove my point of watching out to see if one's really infatuated with you or in love with you. So we look at Cupid and Psyche, and in part 1 we mentioned how when Psyche first met Cupid without seeing him in his domain off the cliff in the meadow, he gave her the illusion of options, which was, if you'd like to stay here and be with me, he told her to enter a particular room, a chamber, as the story says. And it was the chamber to her left, is what he told her. Now, if you look in the story of Beauty and the Beast, especially the adaptation that Disney provides, you would see that Belle and the Beast are supposed to represent Cupid and Psyche, Belle being a book smart girl in France, and the Beast, obviously a beast, is told by the Beast when she is captured, and I say that loosely. The Beast tells her to avoid going in the left wing. Now, one could take that one way, saying the left wing being a chamber, but that left wing also represents the Beast's wings, which we noted in Cupid and Psyche, where Cupid is supposed to be a winged beast. Aha! Hope you're catching the correlation now. Now, I said illusion of choice because at the end of the day, he didn't necessarily control her choices, but he did increase the probability of making her welcome enough to be intrigued, or what I like to call breadcrumbing. See, breadcrumbing is a tendency that is used by certain people, I would say some with narcissistic tendencies, as a tactic of manipulation where they give you just enough to consider bending towards what they want, leaving you with limited resources, whether that be lack of love, lack of attention, many things. And that's why I decided to wait until this point to actually mention the 5 love languages. Aha. See, some people, as far as presenting themselves as someone who wants to love you, they learn some people actually learn you to hurt you, and they take pleasure in hurting somebody because maybe they've been hurt, maybe people have let them down, maybe you are the reminder of someone in the past that has really, to be quite honest, to call a spade, has screwed them over. And they feel the only way that they're comfortable around you is to have dominance over you. So, one might question, why in the world would Disney want to show children this, especially little girls? Why would you want your young child, your daughter, your nephew, your niece, your whatever? Why would you instill these type of values subconsciously within their mind? Pretty fair question, right? Well, in my humble opinion, and again, this is just my opinion. Again, like I've said, narcissists are bred, and it's a lot easier to control someone when they feel like they lack options, even when options present themselves in many ways. Did Belle necessarily or Psyche necessarily have to be with a beast to be happy? No, they could have been happy by themselves or waiting for someone else better to come along. But in the same breath, you see how frequently throughout history women are always taught subconsciously to marry for love or marry for survival. And they're always taught that if they don't initially love their husband per se, they would grow to love their husband. If that's not the biggest deception, I don't think that's what the Most High intended. Looking throughout the manual, the book, the holy book, whatever you want to call it, I don't think God ever intended for women to be deceived by men. But from the very beginning, the woman has always been the one to be deceived, starting from the garden. So today I just want to briefly touch on the 5 love languages, and also I want to define just the idea of sacrifice versus compromise, because those are two huge differences that people like to mix up when it comes to women, men, relationships as a whole. And people decide to measure somebody's happiness based on those two, for the most part. So, the 5 love languages that today's pop culture likes to refer to would be: 1, words of affirmation; 2, quality time; 3, physical touch; 4, acts of service; and 5, receiving gifts. Now, some of them are kind of self explanatory, but for the sake of some just not aware of certain terminology, I'll go ahead and briefly explain each one. So, the first I mentioned, and none of these are in any type of priority or one over the other. These are just 5 ways, main standard ways in which people show love or like to receive love. So, one being words of affirmation. Some people like to be told how much they're valued or they're loved. Nothing wrong with that. I think everybody, for the most part, would like to feel either loved or admired. But some are just more prone to either gifting that to someone or they want to receive that. Now, there's also 2, quality time. Some people like to feel loved and admired through spending time with them. Again, nothing wrong with that either. Then there's 3, physical touch. That goes back to that Eros love again. Or it could be something as simple as a hug, right? Just a hug, maybe a kiss on the cheek or forehead, nothing crazy, right? And we have 4, acts of service. Some people feel that love or appreciation should be in the form of actions, a verb. And then we have 5, receiving gifts. Some people may feel that if you are the type of person, if you feel loved, need to receive a gift, that might be shallow. Not necessarily. It's the act of receiving a gift, not necessarily the most expensive or the cheapest thing. It's just the act, right? Now, how would somebody learn these in order to manipulate you? See, that's where we also look at in Cupid and Psyche and in Beauty and the Beast, where Beast or Cupid, from a distance, had to learn Psyche or Belle. They understood that she was very smart. They understood that she felt lonely. They understood how much she appreciated her father. They understood how beautiful she was. So one could say, you know what? I think I know her because I've studied her long enough. I know her weaknesses. I don't maybe necessarily love her for who she is, but I understand who she is. I adore her, or I'm infatuated with her. I objectify her because she fits my needs. In Beauty and the Beast, it was more so I need a girl to willingly marry me in order to take my true form as a human being again. She fits the bill. Okay? Or in Cupid and Psyche, well, I got an itch, I got a scratch. I mistakenly shot this arrow in my thigh. I don't necessarily love her at first, but I'm infatuated with her, and I don't mind if she grows to love me because because of my infatuation, I don't want anybody else to have her because she's all I think about. Didn't love her, but that's all he could think about. He was obsessed with being with her and him wanting to just spend all his time with her, ignore his mom, yada, yada, yada. You know the story. Now, I bring the concept of Beauty and the Beast because I'm sure most of my listeners, as of right now, have seen the movie from Disney, or if not, you've at least heard of it, or you have somebody in your immediate family or circle who has watched it. If you have Disney Plus, go ahead and watch it. I just so happen to also have it on VHS because I'm old. And I have it on VHS. No, I don't have a VHS player, but for the time being, I also have it on Disney Plus. And I rewatched it, and I'm actually disgusted. Not necessarily with Disney, but I'm disgusted on how just me being a girl in the 90s, watching this in the early 2000s, and saying, wow, I like Belle. She's smart and she's an okay chick because she learned to love somebody who was hideous on the outside for who he was. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. But if you look at it through a wider scope, she had Stockholm syndrome. She she was literally emotionally abused, okay? She wasn't physically abused, but she was emotionally and technically financially abused. It wasn't exactly like she was poor, but in the origin and the earliest version of Beauty and the Beast, her father wasn't well off. And if you'd like me to get into the origins of the earliest version from the French and translate it for you, let me know in the comments. Drop something in the comments and I could have not a CD episode, but more so of the first cassette episode for the ladies. Because we need to talk about this. It's disgusting. Now, before I get carried away and lose my voice even further, I want to talk about the distinction between sacrifice versus compromise. Because as a society, and this is again my humble opinion, I feel that women have been coaxed into sacrificing and compromising when it comes to love more than men have. And I'm not saying men have never been forced to sacrifice or compromise, because yes, they have, especially with today's women in society. Oh, yeah. If not sacrificing, they've done their fair share of compromise in order to appease women and somewhat try to restore peace where there's hell. Don't get it twisted. We're definitely going to have those cassette episodes pretty soon talking about stuff like this because I want people to sound off. Now, let's look at the definition for sacrifice. So, sacrifice in the dictionary is an act of slaughtering an animal or person or surrendering a possession as an offering to God or a divine or supernatural figure. That's a lot, right? That's a lot to take in cuz whoa, does that necessarily fit in today's topic between Cupid and Psyche, Beauty and the Beast? Not so much cuz there's more to the definition. So let's get into that. All right? So we understand as far as the Bible is probably the best way to look at how sacrifice was done before JC came through, right? But aside from sacrifice being a noun, it's also a verb, as we see, because you can sacrifice a possession, an animal, person. But what about yourself? hmm A person can sacrifice their mind, their heart, their spirit, and you're sacrificing all that for what in return? Some people don't ask enough questions before they decide to jump to it out of desperation. Whew. Let's look at compromise. So we have compromise, an agreement or settlement of a dispute that is reached by each side making concessions. The second definition for compromise is to accept standards that are lower than desirable. And the third definition for compromise, to bring into disrepute, danger by indiscreet, foolish, or reckless behavior. Hmm. Boy, oh boy. So, in your opinion, what's the biggest difference between sacrifice and compromise? Do you feel like it's possible to have one without the other? Are they two separate definitions that are parallel, or do they somehow cross? And I say parallel versus cross because, in my opinion, they do cross, and it also results in a crossroads where you're forced to make choices, serious choices. hmm So, with that being said, sound off in the comments because I definitely feel inspired to go ahead and dig deep. Based off your comments, I want to see how this content is allowing you to think, right? I want to see the impact. And I also want to start a new series called The Deception. hmm And I didn't forget about the bonus content with the English language. I'm still working on that because God is constantly revealing little things. And just when I thought I'm finished, Boom, he hits me with something else. Boom, he hits me with something else. Boom, he hits me with something else. Folks, we've been deceived for a very long time. But the best way for deception to creep into the home is through women. That's why my focus has been so much on women. Men, I didn't leave you out. But women, we got to take accountability. Men, y'all got to take accountability. You have to protect us. So, with that being said, I'm going to go rest my voice and I will get back to you guys within a few days with our new series, The Deception. I love y'all. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Okay? We are going to dig deep on the origin stories of a lot of fairy tales that have been a brainwashing tool for children, but specifically girls. Until next time, again, I'm your host, Shayna. Thank you for hitting the like button. Thank you for sharing the content. Thank you for subscribing. And thank you ultimately for your comments. Talk and type to you soon.